Hello and welcome to the Wildlife Osteopath Diaries. Now we're going to be doing a little mini series looking at some of the wildlife work I get to treat, and we're going to show you the highs and the lows because it's at a working wildlife hospital, and what we want to do is show you everything that we possibly can to do with the osteopathic side of the work and what it takes to rehabilitate these beautiful creatures and get them back out into the wild. So welcome to episode 1, and in today's episode we're going to be looking at an interesting hedgehog, an incredible little Merlin, which is our smallest bird of prey, and a sort of a feral duck. It's a crossbreed. It's clearly got some domestic in it, and there's definitely wild. It was picked up it's clearly used to being handled, and you'll see the injury that she's got, and we'll follow her through the series as we will the others, and we'll see how we get on. So make yourself comfortable and enjoy the Wildlife Osteopath Diaries. This hedgehog was brought in to see us, and normally I get to see hedgehogs and they are weak or lame in one leg. This one, its whole core, but especially its back end, was very weak and the legs were splayed. So my job as an osteopath is to try and wake up the muscles that aren't working properly and then introduce normal movement and get the hedgehog to try and move correctly. And what you're watching at the moment is me trying to even up the resting state of some of these core muscles. And core muscles hold the framework together and then allow the locomotor or more superficial musculature to then move the animal along. And if you watch, the hedgehog is turning into, so it's bending round to the left whilst I'm releasing muscles towards the lower end of its back on the right. And this is key to getting this animal to even up the resting state of its musculature. It's all very slow and very gentle. And then let's watch the hedgehog move. Normally hedgehogs that you don't see much of the feet and the legs, whereas at the moment you can see that the back legs are turned outwards and they're splayed, and the claws are longer than I'd like to see because it's not wearing them down, and it's not pulling those legs up under it, and it's not lifting itself up as a mammal should. So this is a weak individual, but bloods were inconclusive and we had no reason to think there was anything else wrong. So how do we get to improve this? Well, a great way of doing it is to wake up the muscles and tell the joints where they are. And this is called proprioception. And proprioception is essential for the normal function of an individual. Knowing where your limbs are and where your body is essential to being able to move and function normally. And what I'm doing here is a series of active exercises where I'm getting the hedgehog to wake up the muscles, and it's a fine line between doing that and annoying it, because this is not about abusing the patient. This is about pushing it up to a limit where it will function at its peak. And I'm focusing down into the individual joints, and we can see on the footage here the hedgehog's back feet are on the ground, but you can tell they're turned outwards slightly. Well, we'll continue following this hedgehog, and we'll see how this little chap gets on, or chapess, and then see what it takes to get one of these beautiful creatures hopefully back out into the wild. Now my next case is of a Merlin, and these are our smallest birds of prey. It's only, I think, the second one I've treated, and they are incredibly well, obviously small, and I'm fast, and so you'll see that in order for me to properly examine and treat this bird, we had to anaesthetise it. Now, it's unusual for me to get to see a Merlin, and this is only the second one I've treated in 30 years. They are migratory, and what I'm doing here is it's injured its right wing, but I want to see if it can move its neck around. And these are sight hunters. So what I'm doing is I'm clearly moving my fingers around to see if she can follow what I'm doing, and that way I can ascertain if she can see things. Now, she was too quick to be able to handle. She would get my hands, and you can probably see a few marks on my thumb. So we decided to anaesthetise her, and the safest way was to intubate, where the vet puts a tube down, and then we control the gas and air that is going into her. And that way I could safely work through the muscles towards the base of her neck and around the wing, and work through, so there was a torsion pattern through her body. She clearly flown into something, but we don't know what. With wildlife, you get very patchy case histories. It's usually somebody finds a bird like this struggling, so they don't exactly know what they've done. And you can see we've got the nurse there monitoring the breathing and everything, and I'm just very gently doing what we call functional unwinding, where I'm taking the tissues into patterns of ease in order to get them to relax. And you can see we put a tail guard on her tail to protect the feathers, because again, you need to maintain birds' plumage when they're in captivity, and it's not a natural environment, so that the feathers do suffer. And so I'm just articulating through, and everything is very gentle and very focused in what I'm doing, and then checking for the wing movement, because these are migratory birds, and she's got a long flight ahead of her to get back down to North Africa. So if we're going to stand any chance, I've got to do as much as I possibly can within a very small window in order to try to help her. And the joints and everything, they're just so fine, and the musculature, and it's so important not to overstress things. So this is all incredibly gentle and incredibly focused with what I'm trying to do for her. And the thing is, apart from this textbook here, there's no other text showing how to do this, and we created these, so if you haven't bought it already, you need to. Fascinating and very worrying. These birds are migratory, and that wing has got to improve in order for that little bird to be able to fly back down to North Africa, where they spend the equivalent of our winters. Now, my final case for today is an amazing duck that was brought in with a wing injury, and she was clearly used to being handled, because the nurses said when they triaged her, which is where when a patient comes in they do all the initial medical assessments, when they got her out of the box that she'd been transported in, she tried to just follow them around the consult room, and you'll see that she's very happy to be handled and treated. So without further ado, let's have a look and see how we got on with her. So my final case for today is this beautiful female duck. Now, she looks like she's a little bit of a cross between an Indian runner and possibly a mallard, but we don't know for sure, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter. I'm still going to treat her exactly the same. The difference being she's a lot more friendly. Wild ducks tend to peck and twist when you're working on them. But she came in with an old shoulder injury, and it felt like she'd fractured something in the shoulder previously. And what I wanted to do was just try and get the wing as good as possible. Didn't really hurt her as such. I could, if I really pushed it, elicit a pain response, but that's not what we're about with osteopathy. We're not about traumatizing or proving that something really hurts. What we want to do is just encourage tissues to get back to as close to normal function as we possibly can. And because she was quite used to being handled and she'd formed a little bit of a bond with the nurse here, she would just go towards her. Now, we decided to move the nurse out of the way to see if she would then just work with me a bit more, and she decided to start checking out my fleece, and basically she's just playing. She's not doing anything bad. She's just playing, but it was allowing me to distract her whilst I could ascertain with her left shoulder, okay, is this good? And then work on the right shoulder to try and just get everything evened up as much as I could. It was clear that the old injury had left her with altered movement, and so she's not a wild duck, and so it was clear, although she'd been brought into a wildlife centre, she was neither wild nor domestic, but she was used to being handled. And there's no stress with her. You can see in the footage she's really enjoying it, which meant I could treat her for longer, so I could get more done, because there wasn't the stress factor that we normally have with wildlife, that is definitely not used to being handled. She would actually look for sort of interaction with you whilst you're treating. But you can see here, as I'm working gently into these soft tissues, she's relaxing. She's clearly interested in the face mask, and it must be weird for some of these animals. I'm amazed how so many of them just accept us when we're wearing face masks. Well, that's it for today's episode. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. Stay tuned for episode 2, where we'll follow up these cases, and we're also going to be introducing new ones as well. I never know what is going to be coming into the hospital, and I never know how these cases are going to progress or not progress. So you are going to see them as fresh as I do. So thank you for watching. Please share these videos, share the knowledge that we're putting out there on the channel, and please help us to grow and to spread the word of what osteopathy can do for wildlife. Thank you for watching.